I was 17 when I learned what true betrayal feels like. Not the kind you cry about and then forget.
No.
The kind that burns deep into your skin. It was almost midnight. I had just finished my second shift at the diner. My feet were sore, my back was tight, and my eyes could barely stay open. All I wanted was to make some noodles, eat in silence, and go to bed. But when I walked into the kitchen, there she was. Aspen. My sister. Leaning against the counter in a silk robe, wine glass in hand like she lived in some Hollywood movie. Her nails were perfect, her makeup flawless, even though we all knew she hadn't worked a real job in her life. She smirked the second she saw me. Well, look what the rats dragged in.
I didn't respond.
I was too tired. I reached for the kettle to boil some water. Just something warm in my stomach before I passed out. But Aspen wouldn't let it go. You know, she said, swirling her wine, you actually look like a house rat. Same tired eyes, same dirty clothes. Still, I said nothing. But she stepped closer and hissed. Do you like this life? Being everyone's maid? It's probably all you're good for. I kept my head down. Opened the cabinet for noodles. My voice was low, tired. I muttered, better than being useless and fake. She froze. I knew I shouldn't have said that. But I was done pretending her cruelty didn't matter. Next thing I knew, she grabbed the kettle. I turned just in time to see her lift it off the stove.
Still boiling.
Still steaming. She didn't even blink. Oops, she said and poured it on my arm. The pain was instant. White hot. Screaming pain. I fell to the floor, clutching my arm as my skin bubbled and turned red. I was shaking, crying, begging her to stop. But she just watched, smiling. Then footsteps.
Mom.
Patricia. She walked into the kitchen, took one look at me on the ground, my skin blistering, and rolled her eyes. That's what happens, she said coldly, when you talk back. And she turned around and walked away. No shock. No anger. Not even a question. Just nothing. I was lying there, screaming inside, and she just left. Aspen turned the TV up. Sat down like it was just another evening. She even lit a candle. Like I wasn't there at all. I dragged myself across the tile, biting my lip to keep from screaming louder. Every breath hurt. My arm felt like it was on fire. I grabbed a towel, soaked it in cold water, and wrapped it around my burn. No ambulance. No medicine. No one came. I sat there in the dark, rocking slightly, whispering to myself over and over. I can't take this anymore. I can't take this anymore. The TV flickered light across the floor. The smell of burning skin filled the room. I saw my reflection in the glass door. My face was pale, eyes red, lips trembling. That was the moment something inside me broke. But it didn't break like a plate falling. It broke like a dam. Quiet.
Heavy. Slow.
And I knew right then. I couldn't trust them anymore. Not my sister. Not my mother. No one in that house. They didn't see me as family. Not even as a person. To them, I was just trash. Something to use. Something to hurt. I pressed the wet towel tighter against my skin and let the cold numb the pain. Just a little. And I made a silent promise to myself. This ends. One day. Not with screams. Not with fists. But with something far worse. After that night, everything changed. Not for them. For me. Aspen still walked around the house like she was a queen. Mom still smiled at church and acted like we were the perfect family. And Dad, well, Dad was just a background blur, drunk in the basement most days.
But me?
I became someone else. I didn't speak unless I had to. I didn't cry. I didn't expect help. I wrapped my burn in gauze and long sleeves, even though it was summer and the air was thick with heat. Every move hurt. Showers were like needles. But I didn't let it stop me. I still went to work at the bakery. Every morning at 5 a.m., I was there, sweeping floors, mixing dough, pretending everything was fine. My boss, Mrs. Callahan, once asked, "Sweetheart, are you okay? You seem different." I smiled. Just tired. Because what else could I say? My sister burned my arm with boiling oil, and my mom said I deserved it. Yeah, that wouldn't land well. People noticed the long sleeves, the way I winced sometimes when carrying trays. But they didn't press. Maybe they didn't want to know. And that was fine by me. At home, no one even asked what happened. Not once. Patricia never mentioned it. Aspen avoided looking at me. The burn on my arm didn't exist in their world. Just like I barely did. I cleaned the house like always. Cooked dinner. Picked up after their messes. But inside I was hollow. Like a ghost just floating through the walls. But ghosts watch. And I was watching closely. I started writing things down. Aspen's weird spending habits. Mom's secret phone calls. I noticed things I never did before, like how Aspen always had new clothes but never worked, or how Mom wore fancy jewelry even though she said we were broke. I wasn't stupid. I was invisible, and that made me dangerous. At night, I'd lie in bed, my arm pulsing with pain, and I'd stare at the ceiling. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't beg. I planned. I didn't know what I'd do yet, but I knew I'd never be helpless again. Never. And somehow, that thought made the pain bearable. One day, I stood in front of the mirror in the bakery's bathroom, rolled up my sleeve, and looked at the healing wound. My skin was red, raw, patchy, ugly. But it wasn't just a burn. It was a reminder, a symbol, of who they were, of what they did, and of what I was becoming. They thought they'd broken me, but really, they'd set something on fire. And it was only just beginning. I thought the burn would be the hardest part. But no. It was the way they moved on like nothing happened. Like I hadn't screamed on that kitchen floor. Like I didn't carry the smell of cooked flesh every time I rolled up my sleeve. Weeks passed. My arm scabbed, then peeled, then scarred. Still, I said nothing. At home, Aspen kept prancing around like she was a celebrity. Her social media was full of fake brand deals and rented outfits she pretended were gifts. "Another shoot in the city today," she'd announce, flipping her hair. But I noticed something. Her bags had the store tags still attached. Her photos were all taken in the same 3 corners of her house. And the same guy dropped her off each night, a man way too old and way too rich-looking. Mom didn't care. She bragged about Aspen to anyone who would listen. My daughter's an influencer, always working with brands. Meanwhile, she told me to hurry up with the dishes. But I had no time to care. I had bills. I had burned cream. I had shifts. The bakery was my only peace. Warm light, soft music, the smell of cinnamon and bread. And Mrs. Callahan, she wasn't like the others. She trusted me with the register, taught me how to handle invoices, let me stay late when I didn't want to go home. One day, she asked if I had a bank account for my pay. I didn't. I'd been cashing checks at the corner store and hiding the money in a red envelope under my mattress. Still, I wanted to do better. Be better. So, I applied for one. That's when everything shifted. I sat across the desk from a woman at the bank. She frowned at the screen. "Sorry, miss, you've already taken out a loan with us." "What?" I blinked. "No, I haven't." She showed me the screen. My name. My social. A $1,200 loan from 2 years ago. Missed payments. Interest piling up. I felt cold all over. "That's not mine." "Do you have a sister?" she asked gently. And just like that, I knew. Aspen. She'd stolen my information. Probably from a school form or old tax paper. She took out a loan in my name and never paid it back. And just like she'd poured oil on me, she'd poured debt on me too. But this time I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled. Because now I had proof. I went home, locked my door, and started digging. Aspen's emails, her screenshots, her posts where she joked, "Treating myself with your money. Thanks, sis." She thought she was clever, but she didn't know I was done being her punching bag. I called the lender, explained the fraud, sent screenshots. And then I did something that would change everything. I Googled, how does debt collection work? I fell down a rabbit hole, YouTube videos, forums, free PDFs. I read everything. Learned how some companies bought old debt for pennies, then legally collected on it. It was ugly, but it was legal. And it gave me an idea. The next week, I applied for a scholarship to take a free community business course. I got in. Every night after work, I studied. Learned how LLCs worked. Learned what people called junk debt. Learned how to buy it, hold it, grow it. And I started saving harder. Toast for breakfast. Bakery leftovers for dinner. Every tip went into that same red envelope. It wasn't just money anymore. It was fuel. I didn't want revenge that came with screams. I wanted revenge that came with paperwork, with interest rates, with the kind of pain that hits slow and lasts years. Aspen had taken my name and used it like a joke. She had no idea I was going to own hers. They say revenge is best served cold. I didn't want it cold. I wanted it controlled.
Precise. Silent.
It started with a name. I called my company Ember Collection Group. Ember, like the slow burn left after a fire. Like what was left of me after they scorched everything. It sounded official. Legal.
Clean.
Just like I wanted. The paperwork wasn't hard once I knew what I was doing. I registered the LLC online. Bought a P.O. box. Got a cheap email domain. All legal. All mine. Then I waited. I kept checking the debt exchange platforms I learned about in class. Old, unpaid accounts sold for pennies. Most people ignored them. I didn't. That's where I found it. $14,000 worth of unpaid debt. Aspen's beauty treatments, designer rentals, fake influencer gear. And Patricia's church credit cards, payday loans, overdraft charges from boutiques she pretended were gifts. All of it, bundled and forgotten. To them, it was trash.
To me, it was poetry.
I bought it for $412. $412 to own their shame. I didn't send anything right away. I didn't want them to know. I let it sit. Interest ticking. Like a clock on their future. At the bakery, Mrs. Callahan promoted me. Said she'd never seen someone so sharp with numbers. She let me run the monthly books, even trusted me to negotiate supplier discounts. I smiled politely. But inside I was laughing. They never even looked at me. Not once. And yet here I was, building a business in the shadows of their lies. Then one night, I got a call from a blocked number. It was Patricia. Her voice was sweet.
Fake.
Oh, honey, we were just thinking about you. Aspen's moving into a new apartment. It's a little pricey, but with your help. She paused. We'd like you to co-sign. I almost dropped the phone. No apology. No mention of the burn. The loan. The years of silence. Just another demand. I took a breath. Let her words float in the air like smoke. Then I said, you raised a snake and burned a child. I'll help, but you won't like how. She gasped. I hung up. And that was it. The next day, I printed 2 copies of a letter. Put one in an envelope addressed to Patricia. One to Aspen. Inside, a simple message. Effective immediately, your debts have been transferred to Ember Collection Group. You now owe me. Taped to the letter was a picture. A photo I took of my arm 2 days after the burn. Raw, blistered, screaming red. And on a sticky note, I wrote,
Oops.
Accidents happen. No signature. No threats. Just truth. It felt like breathing after being underwater for years. They wanted me quiet. Invisible.
Gone.
Instead, I became the thing they never saw coming. I changed my number after I mailed the letters. Turned off notifications. I didn't need to hear them scream. Their fear would come to them. In time. And when it did, I'd be ready. Not as their daughter. Not as their sister. But as their creditor. The letters landed 3 days later. I didn't need to be there to see their faces. I could picture it clearly, Patricia holding the envelope like it might explode. Aspen rolling her eyes until she saw the photo inside. Until she saw my burn, her debt, and our roles reversed. I imagined the silence in that house for once aimed at them. No screaming. Just confusion. Panic. I didn't respond when Patricia called 27 times in a row. Or when Aspen sent 5 blocked messages that all started with, "How dare you?" I didn't need to reply. I already had. And the system would handle the rest. Creditors don't call to beg.
They call to collect.
I watched from a distance as everything started to shift. Aspen's Instagram slowly went quiet. No more daily photo shoots. No more stories about her brand partners. She tried selling her designer bags, but most were rentals. Some she hadn't returned. She posted a video crying, saying her accounts were frozen. Blamed hackers. Blamed trolls. Never once blamed herself. Meanwhile, Patricia started skipping church. The donations dried up. Apparently, when you owe $4,000 to a Christian credit union, the Sunday smiles turn cold real fast. At work, I kept my head down. Mrs. Callahan gave me a small raise. Said the books were the cleanest they'd ever been. She even asked if I'd consider a long-term role, maybe even a future partnership. I said I'd think about it. Because for the first time, I had options. Real ones. One night, I sat on my bed with the red envelope in my lap. It wasn't just stuffed with bills anymore. It had weight. It held every hour I'd worked, every bruise I'd hidden, every tear I refused to let fall. That envelope had power. It held me, and it was growing. Then one random Tuesday night, something happened I didn't expect. Patricia called me again. This time from her real number. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Her voice was shaky. Not fake sweet anymore. Just tired. "Darla, it's your mother. I know you're angry. I know we've had moments, but this has gone far enough. We raised you. We fed you. Aspen needs help, and you're acting like a stranger. You owe us." "I owe you?" I played the message twice just to make sure I heard it right. Then I laughed. Not a big laugh. Just a small, breathy, "Of course you did" laugh.
She still didn't get it.
She still thought I was that quiet girl who cleaned up after her and took the blame. She didn't realize she'd been living on borrowed time, and now I was the one collecting. I didn't call back. Instead, I wrote a second letter. Shorter this time. Inside, a simple page, a payment schedule. Their minimum monthly amounts. Interest rate. Timeline for wage garnishment if left unpaid. At the bottom, I added a note. This isn't personal. It's business.
Just like you always taught me.
I sealed it, mailed it, and never looked back. Because the truth was it was personal. But they didn't deserve to know that. Let them call it business. Let them treat me like a number. Because soon, I'd become the only number that mattered. I hadn't been back to that house in almost a year. Not since the night Aspen poured oil on my arm. Not since Patricia turned her back while I lay screaming. But that morning, I woke up calm. I ironed my dress, the same deep blue one I wore the night I got burned. The fabric still had a faint mark from that night.
Fitting.
I walked, not because I didn't have money for a ride, but because I wanted to feel every step. Let the sidewalk know I was no longer crawling. When I knocked, the door opened faster than I expected. Aspen. She looked wrecked. Her makeup was smeared, her hair stringy and flat. The robe she wore now wasn't silk. It was old and pilled, like it had been washed too many times. She blinked. "You?" I smiled. "Miss me?" She sneered. "You think this is funny? You ruined everything." I tilted my head.
"No."
"You ruined everything when you poured boiling oil on me. Remember?" "Oops, right?" She opened her mouth, but didn't say a word. Behind her, Patricia appeared, limping in her slippers, clutching the wall like it hurt to breathe. Her voice cracked. "You came here for money, didn't you?" You always were a leech. Just like we said. I reached into my bag, pulled out 2 envelopes. One was thick, one was thin. I handed Patricia the thick one first. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside, a foreclosure deed. I had purchased the outstanding liens on the house. It wasn't much, just a tiny inheritance from my grandmother they never maintained properly. But it was theirs. And now it was mine. They owed back taxes, repairs, and unpaid property fees. I had acquired them all. This house now legally belongs to Ember Collection Group, I said plainly. Patricia's mouth hung open. No, no, this is our home. I handed her the second envelope. Inside, a notarized letter stating that all future garnished wages, hers and Aspen's, would be rerouted into a fund. A scholarship, created under my name, for girls estranged from abusive families. Aspen laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You can't do this. You're not smart enough. This is fraud or revenge or something. I pulled out my phone, tapped play. A voice filled the room. Aspen's voice. Oops. Then my scream. Then Patricia's voice, cold and sharp. That's what happens when trash talks back. The recording ended. Silence stretched between us. Patricia looked like she'd been punched in the chest. Her knees wobbled. Aspen was pale now, hand gripping the doorframe. You recorded us? She whispered. I recorded survival, I said. Patricia tried again. We raised you. We gave you food.
Clothes.
A roof. No, I said quietly. You gave me scars. Silence. And the belief that I was worthless. I turned toward the door. Aspen lunged forward, grabbing my arm. The burned one. But I didn't flinch. I looked her straight in the eye and said, You don't get to touch me anymore. She let go like I was fire.
Good.
Because I was. I walked out, sunlight hitting my face as I stepped off that porch. I didn't run. I didn't look back. The air felt lighter than it had in years. At the bakery, Mrs. Callahan was waiting. She looked at the documents I handed her and said nothing. Then, without asking, she hugged me. Later that week, we hung a new sign on the bakery window. The Ember Girls Fund, for those who survived. I stood outside, staring at it. My arm itched under the fabric of my sleeve. I rolled it up. The scar was still there, raised, red, a little ugly. But I wasn't ashamed. It was my proof. My power. And now, every time I looked at it, I didn't feel pain. I felt peace. Because I didn't just get revenge. I got free. Months passed. I didn't hear from Patricia again. Not a call. Not a letter. Nothing. Aspen's social media disappeared. The last post was some vague caption about taking a break from mental health. But everyone knew. Word travels fast in small towns when debt collectors come knocking. And me? I was still working at the bakery, still waking up early, still dusted in flour most days. But things were different. Mrs. Callahan gave me more than just shifts now. She gave me trust. I managed supplier calls. I hired part-time help. She even talked about opening a second location, with me as part owner. Sometimes I stayed late just to sit by the window, warm coffee in hand, and watch the streetlights flicker on.
Peace looked like that.
One quiet afternoon I saw her. Aspen. At the grocery store. She was wearing a sweatshirt 2 sizes too big, pushing a cart with just a few cans inside. She stood at the customer service counter, arguing in a low voice. I could only hear pieces. Just a mistake on the fee. It wasn't supposed to bounce. The clerk didn't budge. Aspen turned her head slightly and saw me. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe she couldn't. Either way, she didn't say anything. And neither did I. I just walked past. Not out of hate. Out of nothing. Because I didn't need to fight anymore. That girl who used to lie awake, biting back tears, begging for someone to care, she didn't live in me now. I came home that night, dropped my keys on the counter, and curled up on my couch with a warm blanket and a cinnamon bun from the bakery. I rolled up my sleeve. The scar was still there. Not pretty, not soft, but mine. And for the first time, I didn't wish it away. That burn used to be my shame, my silence. Now, it was something else entirely. It was proof that I lived through fire, and didn't just survive it. I built something from it. That was my revenge. Not to scream louder, not to hurt them back, but to outgrow the cage they built around me. To turn their cruelty into a fund for other girls like me. To smile at the same scar that once made me cry. They poured oil on my skin, but I used the flames to bake my future. The bakery was quiet that morning. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. Light streamed through the windows, landing perfectly on the new sign we'd hung just a month ago. Ember Girls Fund, in honor of survival. I was sweeping near the front when the bell above the door jingled. A woman stepped in. Early 30s, tired eyes, holding the hand of a girl who couldn't have been older than 12. The girl's left cheek had a small purple bruise beneath the eye. Fading but still there. They looked nervous. Out of place. I stepped forward and smiled.
Hi.
What can I help you with? The woman opened her mouth, hesitated, then pulled a crumpled flyer from her purse. It was one of ours from the community board down the street. I heard this fund helps girls. I looked at the little girl. She didn't speak, just stared at the floor, fingers twisting inside the sleeves of her jacket. I nodded. It does. The woman exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for years. She reached into her bag, but I gently stopped her. No forms right now. Just sit. Warm bread's on the house. They sat at the corner table while I poured 2 glasses of milk and set down a fresh cinnamon roll. I walked over, crouched to the little girl's eye level. What's your name, sweetie? Her eyes met mine for a second, then dropped. Jamie. I smiled softly. You're not trash, Jamie. You're the fire. Don't forget that. Her eyes widened just a little, and I saw it. That flicker. The same flicker I'd once had. It wasn't much, but sometimes a spark is all it takes. I stood up, walked back behind the counter, and picked up my red ledger, the same one I used to keep beneath my mattress.
The same one that saved me.
And now it was saving others. Because my story didn't end with revenge. It ended with legacy. Quiet.
Steady.
Burning low. An ember that never died.